August 27th, 2024 Planning and Zoning Commission's working session. It is now 5:02 and we are starting. Quick call to order with the roll call. Commissioner Barrow.
Here.
Commissioner Martinez.
Here.
Commissioner Edward.
I am here.
Commissioner Baldwin.
So here.
Commissioner Taglia Petra.
Pietra.
Piet-
Here.
Okay. Commissioner Haywood is absent today. I don't know if we are expecting her or not. Going on, Commissioner Holm and myself, I am here. So, all right. So let the record reflect those that are present and that we have a quorum for the meeting. So we'll go on to the working session. Planning and Zoning Department will present a draft municipal use zone district for review and discussion. The meeting is not a hearing and no action on the subject will be taken. The chair of the Planning and Zoning Commission may or may not allow public comment. We are really just looking to gain information and continue the discussion from the previous meeting. And with that, I will ask Planning and Zoning Director Makita Hill to please.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Commissioners, good evening. In your packet for this evening, there is a draft of the municipal use zone that is dated August 27th. Do you need a packet?
Yes.
Okay. Madam Chair, Commissioner Martinez, are you able to call up the packet on your computer? But anyway, while the commissioner is looking, I just want to briefly go over what you are looking at this evening. The August 27th, 2024 draft of this zone has changes in the text, and the changes are in green. We have attempted to capture all of the comments and concerns of the Planning Commission. Staff has had some language clarifications as well, but we have attempted to incorporate as best we could. The zone has changes in the text, and the changes are in green. We have attempted to capture all.
Sounds like a 10-second delay.
He's got Zoom going.
Oh,
get
he's
out of
got
Zoom.
Zoom.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's so they can edit out the bad words and the beep.
But anyway, as a working session, I simply invite the commission to have a look at the revision work that has been done. Our technician, Darnell, has a thumb drive with pictures of some of our village-owned properties so that we have something of a backdrop to look at and bring home a little more clearly the need for something that contains all of our critical public uses. But in the meantime, Madam Chair and Commissioners, do you have any questions or comments on the revisions that have been made?
Director Hill, I just want to compliment you on capturing the sort of free-ranging conversation that we had last time and incorporating it as sort of cleanly and nimbly as you did. Of course, with new edits, other questions come up, so I'm really looking forward to the iterative nature of this because there still are a couple of things that got raised that I think maybe we're not quite there on. The one thing I really want to underscore, though, and I really appreciate the sort of comparison matrix,
Yes.
is that we're talking about functionally, this is only a conditional use, right? It always has to come to a review of the planning director and then P&Z and then the Board of Trustees. Whereas in other places, it's a combination of permissive and conditional use. And so I like this is really clean it's engaged, and if it's a village municipal use, if it's village property, that makes total sense. And then we can have the conversation about the context in which it's being, cited or developed or, extended. So, nice job.
Thank you. Madam Chair, Commissioners, floor is open. Any additional comments or questions?
Commissioners? Commissioner Farrell?
I want to compliment you as well. I won't go into that. But in doing the comparison, I think we're way ahead of all the other municipalities for clean and easy to understand and spot on. So thank you for incorporating the brilliant input from my fellow commissioners last week, or not last week, last session.
Yeah, you're quite welcome. And to Darnell, do we have pictures?
Yes.
Okay.
While he's pulling those up, let me just mention that this is a project I think every community needs to take on. I mean, it's never going to come to a point where we've got it all because of just the dynamic nature of government and the ongoing, serving the ongoing needs of your community. So while we are really tackling this now, and this is probably one of the biggest tackles we need to do for wording on this, I think we do need to still put it as a tickler to revisit, say, in 2 years or whatever, so that we've got it on a calendar and it isn't just put on a shelf and forgotten about until it's an, oh my, what have we done situation that we keep abreast of everything we need to have done.
And Madam Chair, thank you, and Commissioners, as you can see from the list of uses, it is a short list. It's very specific and speaks to the function of the government. So as we move forward, we are going to have conversations at these hearings and at hearings of the Board of Trustees when something along these lines comes about and there are questions as to what it's for. What it's for is for these uses. And so this attempts to encapsulate what are the essential functions of the government, and hopefully we will be able to stay focused on that as we utilize this. Brennan, are you ready? Okay, why don't you go ahead and put the pictures up. We're just going to run through these in really no particular order, but sometimes it's useful to see them. This is our fire station, and it is owned by the village, and it's at 4th and Schulte, and the fire station is under a commercial zone. So this is our 4th Street parking lot, which is nice to have when there are events along 4th Street. And this parking lot is a combination of C1 and R3 zoning, and yet it is a singular use. It is not a series of uses. And so this is another example of trying to pinpoint precisely what our uses are and why we need this district. Commissioner Edward. Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, I apologize.
May I? Mother, may I?
Commissioner? Commissioner?
Hey, when you say a singular use, I've been there where they've had not just parking, but like a fair, an arts and crafts fair. Does that fall into your line? I think when you say a singular use?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, yes. We're looking at a parking lot that is owned by the village and it's utilized for parking. It doesn't mean it couldn't be used for something else that's event related.
Okay.
But at least it gives us a point of saying, this is a parking lot, this is what it will be more a matter of assigning primary use.
So having a festival on it instead of people parking there and having a festival on it, that's,
It could be discussed, yes,
it happens right now.
yeah,
Okay.
okay. Darnell, you can move to the next one, and this is our open space right up there along 4th Street, and a chunk of it is actually zoned C1 on 4th Street. And so more underscoring, there's a building, there are structures, and obviously we're not going to pursue C1 uses. It was available, it's in an accessible site. There are a lot of possibilities we can use it for, but as you can see, C1 is not something we would be looking at.
So the balance of that is A1, correct?
The balance of it is A1, yes, and C1 up against 4th Street. Yeah. Okay,
I
this,
have a question.
Madam Chair, Commissioner
Commissioner
Edward.
Edward?
So as it relates to that, sometimes you might get a zoning and the parcel size, because we hear this sometimes, is not such that you can actually effectively use it for the zoning that it's intended. And if I was to take that parcel as an example, the ingress and egress off of 4th Street is, I think, a hazard at best. And to the extent that people can come in and out of there in effective parking so that that can actually be used at a C1 grade intensity within this ordinance that we're talking about, would there be the possibility or the process by which there would be a limit on how much of the A1, which I don't believe you can put parking on, would be, you would replat it to make it a more effective size? How does that come into play?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, it certainly may, depending on what the village needs the property for. It's not just whether we would have a need to utilize this zone, but then the land has to be configured for its purpose.
Okay.
So yes.
And connected with that, in the Palindrome project, there was an element as to whether or not the property was blighted. And the property used to be occupied by businesses that I used to actually frequent. There was a pharmacy there and a barber shop and stuff. It didn't become blighted until the village owned it. And this is actually a place where there was an ongoing concern in the form of a feed store. And my understanding is that that feed store is no longer there.
Right.
It's closed. And to what degree are we going to allow our own property to fall in disrepair so it's going to become another blighted property for which somebody's going to come in and take advantage of the situation?
Well, Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, it is a very good point that you raise. The purpose of this is to utilize the property and to have specific uses for it. And so engaging the zone for that purpose, we hope that none of our properties will end up in that condition.
So do we have a policy that will actually maintain the property?
I would say that it is incumbent on the government to do so, particularly properties that may house village personnel, but it is incumbent on the government to maintain what we have.
And would this ordinance preclude us from being a landlord?
I don't believe it would necessarily preclude it, but I don't believe that it's necessarily the mission of this district to do so. Yeah.
Those are the questions that I think, I don't know, maybe need to be discussed or how they need to be treated and stuff.
Yeah. No, and, fair,
Yes.
yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Director Hill, this conversation sort of sparks another thought that I wasn't quite sure how or when to bring up, but assuming that we do determine what a municipal use zone is the plan to whole cloth rezone the village parcels to that? in one action, or is it something as they come in, but then there'd be a separate one for things that are already in? Just trying to figure out, like, it's important, I think, that we have clarity about the zone, and then that the village has clarity about what the zone is or isn't, and to have different things at different times and different parcels, I think, would be confusing. So what is the intent at this point?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Baldwin, it is my understanding that in the event some version of this is adopted, the priority will be to make assessments for the use of this zone with properties we already have, so that we can secure what we have now. And how it'll be utilized in the future, there's been a little bit of discussion of the fact that if we are projecting use of this, that sometime in the future we may need to develop some policy to go along with it. But the priority for this is to secure from a zoning and land use what we already have.
Let me springboard off of that question. So are we talking about really treating it as though as we did in the past, long past, our special use zones, which were by lot, by use, but it still maintained its underlying character, so that if it was a C1, it's still a C1 or an A1 or whatever, but there was basically an overlapping special use for that particular lot. So are we talking about that, or are we talking about taking away everything and saying?
Yes. Madam Chair, Commissioners, yes, this would be, in the event this is adopted, we become an applicant like any other applicant, and this zone would substitute the existing zoning. It would not be an overlay application.
So if the village at some point decided to sell the property, trade it, whatever we ended up doing to dispose of it, would that new entity then have to come back?
Yes, Madam Chair and Commissioners,
I just want to make
yes.
sure that that is a clear policy and in the ordinance that is.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, in the event we go through that process, the entity or individual purchasing it would, if they're not a government, would not have access to this, so the zoning would have to change.
Okay.
Yeah.
Commissioner Martinez, I think you were
Yes.
waving at me too.
This is a twofold, Madam Chairman and Director Hill.
Yes.
One of the things that I'm more concerned about is that the village is purchasing property. The village is investing into buying property. Piggybacking on what happens if they decide to sell, it's a question, why would you piggyback to buy and then want to sell? So my question is, doesn't it seem that what the village is striving for, no different than the master plan, if the village is planning on buying these things for specific open space, office space, whatever it is, would it not be appropriate that the village already has a plan in place that you can give us some input? Because I think what we're doing is we're going out on a shotgun over here, where realistically, you guys are buying it, and we're hoping that you guys are buying it for specific reasons, whether it's open space or commercial uses for the village, et cetera, et cetera. And these zoning changes versus, is there ability to get some kind of master plan on what the village intention is with purchasing and investing and zoning into it?
Yes. Commissioner, Madam Chair, Commissioner Martinez, yes, I agree with you completely. You know, in many instances with the village's purchases, it is for open space. More times than not, that is what the community wants invested in. As you realize, we have things other than open space going on, but in some instances, commissioners, we will buy a piece of property to widen a road or to create a drainage facility, or we may need a pump house, we may need a telecommunications tower. There may be something as very, very straightforward and utilitarian as that. Sometimes we can't see that coming a need arises, and as the government, we have to respond to it. But we will have an opportunity to look long-term beyond those things for other facilities. And as I mentioned at some point, I anticipate we will be given the task of developing some public facility policy to go along with that. So yes, there will have to be some planning for these facilities.
Following up on that, especially with what Commissioner Edwards defined, is that the investment in this particular one right over here is a very large investment. And I appreciate everything you're talking about, but I think what we need to do is we're going through this process where we have an example of what potentially can happen, but more importantly is that we're throwing out zonings, right? But we're not hearing back of potential usage. And that tends to kind of question me, because I would have thought that the village would have bought it with intent.
Right.
Okay?
And Madam Chair and Commissioner Martinez, I agreed, and in many instances, that is exactly the case, particularly with purchases of land for open space. You know, when the village is interested in purchasing land for open space, they announce that they want it for open space. And so usually those purchases go along with an announcement, like a road or a drainage pond. But sometimes it will be for the future, and your concern is spot on.
So I guess all of our questions right now is, are we privy to understand why the village bought this specific property? Because I think it's a concern. I think we're going through all this and we're really getting into zoning requirements, and then we're actually relating it to something, as Commissioner defined, what really,
Edward.
what really is it feasibly accessible for and usable for? So my first question is, did the village already have an existing reason for buying it? I guess would be my question.
And I can jump in here, because on this particular one, I mean, I was on the Board of Trustees at that time, and it was actually bought for open space, period. There was quite a call for open space, being a semi-rural community. Public had voted, you know, through bond issue that they wanted to support that into the future. And so this space actually came available, I think, but if memory serves me, and I could be wrong, that it was actually in a couple of different parcels, but then came available where we were able to purchase it in total. But I hear where you're going with it. It would be nice from a perspective of the P&Z and the general public that if the, you know, powers that be within the village, our mayor, whenever it is elected, and our Board of Trustees actually can provide at least a short-term, and I say short, you know, 3 to 5 year outlook on perhaps where they think we are going and what the upcoming needs may be, so that we can take a look and understand why a particular piece of property is being viewed for purchase. And granted, there may be times that we end up purchasing something with the knowledge that we may be able to trade it for a better advantage on something that's more adjacent to something, you know, for example, something that's adjacent to that open space to create it a larger space. My concern here, and I think this is kind of where we're all eventually going, is the whole thought of used and useful. We're not just willy-nilly going out trying to become, you know, the master owner of properties here in the village. We've got a purpose, we've got an intended use, and that's what we're doing it for.
And Madam Chair, just one follow-up, because I think this is a critical part. It's the same thing with the Abruzzo. We have property, but we have a subject existing on it. What do we do with that? Because that's not open space. Same thing over here. We have open space, but we have a subject property on it. What are we going to do to it? Are we going to become landlords? Are we going to become open space? And I agree that when you buy something, it is, but I think what we have to understand is the intent, no different than the Abruzzo property. I think that that's one heck of a investment, but the question being, how do we get it from where we're at with zoning, with what you guys have to do, and probably what has to go through the trials and errors? What is going to happen to that? What is going to happen to this? And I think those are important questions that are put up front since now. And I think that's part of my reason for bringing it up. Thank you.
Commissioner Baldwin, I think you've got something.
All right. We've got sort of three different buckets, if you will. We've got the bucket that Commissioner Martinez is talking about, which is, okay, so you're interested in buying something, or there's a topic or a subject about possibly buying something. What's the plan? Why are we buying it? Is it open space? Is it municipal? We should be clear about that and communicate clearly with the public about that, providing the opportunity for open meeting, public deliberation, discussion, and decision, ultimately by the Board of Trustees. We have a lot, I mean, this is just a couple of pictures, I'm assuming there are more. We have a lot of property currently, right, that functions. We are sitting in such property. There's the old Village Hall. There's, again, the parking lot, Hartnett Park, the barn. I mean, there's land that the village currently owns, and it has a purpose or functions in one way or another. There's a third bucket, though, which is what I would call transition. And that's also the stuff that I think concerns us a little, which is, all right, we own it, that deed is done. Now what do we do with it? And maybe that a piece of it, and we'll just use the Anderson House, ton of open space, beautiful open space, and a big residence. And what do we do with that big residence? We've got Miller Feed. What do we do with Miller Feed? It was a leased business. The village still owned it, but it was leased, and the village chose not to renew that lease. So what's the plan? So I think there's no question that there's a need for a municipal use zone, and I think we're trying to wrap our heads around, there are different stages of property, and so how would this apply to each of those? Connected to that, if there isn't a policy for surplus land designation, there needs to be. At some point, there will be something, to Commissioner Everett's point, that will need to be sold or want to be sold. What is the process for declaring it surplus? It's not just sort of a fire sale, at the end of a Board of Trustees meeting. Please, no. And related to that, I'm looking at these different properties, and they have different functions. Some are on Fourth, some are on Rio Grande, some are on Green Valley, some are on other parts of Rio Grande. And so right now, the setbacks are listed as a minimum of 25 feet. But a parking lot on Fourth and Miller Feed on Fourth shouldn't necessarily, I think it probably should reflect the adjacent zoning of that property, right? So that it sits in the context, which in the case of the Anderson property is 125 feet setback? So that way it sits in context, but it still is a municipal use zone for the function of that property. That might be one way to get at that context piece.
So if I may, you are basically saying we need to, even though it is a municipal piece of property, we still want it to fall within the character of the surrounding properties. We don't, for example, the Abruzzo property, or Anderson, we don't want to, suddenly have a high-rise municipal, all mirrored glass building go up instead or whatever, or a sea of asphalt for parking for the next 100 people that are supposed to be working there. We still want it to maintain the character, not only of the village, but of the surrounding properties.
And Madam Chair, Commissioners, point well made, and I can emphasize that in the event some version of this is adopted and we become the applicant, we become responsible for demonstrating consistency with the character areas in our master plan, just like anyone else. We're subject to the same policies.
Okay, and let me jump in for just a second.
Yeah.
It's like we're going to be governing the decisions of ourselves, and that's one thing I'm concerned about. Because if it's there and the P&Z says, we're not going to allow it, and we bounce it up to the board saying this is our recommendation to deny, and the board, which of course has the new mayor or whoever that's trying to put forth whatever this new business venture, and they turn around and rubber stamp it, yes. Not to say that they would, but I'm just giving you an example. I mean, if it's blatantly against the policies, what kind of recourse, yes, thank you. What kind of recourse does the villagers have in a situation like that? I mean, what power can come back and veto something because we're going to have our upper echelon of government making a recommendation or approving themselves?
Madam Chair, Commissioners, what I can offer is what we do with all of our cases that comes to staff, and we produce a report, and part of our job is review and analysis of the very things that we're discussing. So either we would produce a report that allows us to connect all those dots. If the dots don't connect, then we do something else. But it is incumbent on us with any case that we present something cohesive to the Planning Commission and the Board of Trustees. That is our responsibility to you.
Okay, in recognizing, the public needs to recognize that in a decision-making base like that, it's still not going to be 100%. There's still perhaps going to be people that don't exactly like it, but the overall decision has to be in support of it, and it can't be something that's so blatantly in the face of everything the village stands for. So, okay, I'm just, I've made my soapbox statement.
Okay.
Commissioner Barrow.
Director Hill, I want to pick up on something that Madam Chairwoman brought up. She mentioned that when she was on the Board of Trustees, that they purchased that, and she couldn't recall the purpose of the purchase, and
Oh, no.
so.
No, definitely, I know the purchase. We purchased that with open space in
Oh, I
mind.
thought you were
No,
mumbling
no.
on that. Okay,
No.
it was intended for open space. Doesn't matter for what I was going to say. It seems to me that knowing various pictures that you're going to put up and a few that we know about already, is there a regular review of what the purposes of our purchases and our land uses are in the village? Does it get lost? For example, another hopefully ridiculous example, we purchased that for open space, but perhaps forgot about it. Do we have a method of yearly, at least, review of usages of everything that the village owns?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Barrow, I'm not aware of a set annual review. I'm aware that it's continuous and adaptive, in that we don't know when a property is going to come along, and then something comes along, it's in an area where we need this, and the subject property might fulfill that need. But I would suggest, perhaps for the next meeting, I could put together some information on the decisions the village has made to date on purchase and use, and have that documentation before you, because it appears to me, and ultimately, obviously, we want to take this to public review and public comment and all the new and fresh ideas that are going to come along with it. But I think having the information from the village on why we bought something and what we use it for, I think would be informative for the commission, because we are probably going to get those questions during the public review, and I want the commission to be prepared with that information, and having that discussion here, I think, would be useful before we launch into the public review process. So it may be that we would need one more meeting with this, and instead of pictures, documents to read on what that process has been.
Director Hill.
Thank you.
Would it be possible, and I'm springboarding back off of your comment, Commissioner Barrow, in our policy that we want to also create, creating a requirement for an annual review, such as what you just stated, of what the current use, what the intended use was, and so that it becomes a public report back that would be presented probably both at the P&Z and the BOT. But put that as an annual calendared item. I think that helps reinforce the purchases, reinforces the use, and informs the public of what we're doing. Commissioner Edward, do you have something? Oh, I'm sorry. So,
Madam Chair, Commissioners, I think that's a great idea. I'll have to make inquiries about it, but as you already see from our conversations, the ideas driving this are asking other questions, and we need to start networking with other bodies of information so that we can understand the bigger picture a little more clearly.
great.
So, Commissioners, I would suggest continuance as a work session item to the next meeting that we are able to do it, so that we can put this information together for you for that discussion. Now, I am aware that we have a hearing on September 10th. The work session would have to be later in the month. I would send messages by email to the commission with proposed dates as to when we could pick up this discussion.
Okay, Director Hill, if you
Thank
want to
you.
continue, yeah.
Okay, Darnell, do we have any more pictures? Okay, that's Edgewood Park. And that is our, and you can go to the next one, our, I think they call that our grassy selections, both of which are under VC zoning as I understand it. Do we have any more, Darnell? Okay, and then this is our Agri Center, all A1, and very, very grateful that we have it. But while it is an agricultural use with what planners call incidentals related to the agricultural use, this is not as much of a concern for us. So there will be instances where the existing zoning is spot on and we don't need to do a thing. But this proposed zone is in the instances when we do. Okay. And then this is where we are, zoned A1. So, and this one is Old Village Hall. We're going to have as an announcement, we'll have a meeting tomorrow evening from 6 to 7:30 with proposals for its renovation and continued use.
What is it, so?
This is, I believe, zoned A1. And then this is the redevelopment site. So anyway, thank you so much. And this is a continuing item. You've given staff some things to do. We will prepare that information for you for the next time we are able to discuss this, hopefully sometime at the end of September. For the municipal zone, are there any other comments or questions?
Commissioner Edward?
Dueling commissioners.
Okay.
Quick question. The Albuquerque Public School sites, the 3 schools that are within the village proper, would those also be rezoned to MU, or would there be a conversation with APS on that?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Baldwin, I'm not certain that we would pursue that. This may come into play in the event we have new sites, because there will be new opportunities for new agreements and how we might work together on those things. But it has not been mentioned or discussed to date that we would seek that for an existing school site.
Thank you.
Commissioner Edward?
Good catch. So it wasn't too long ago when the Valles Caldera Ranch was purchased by the federal government for $100 million. And in the element, how does that relate to what we're doing here? I mean, I think for a municipality, we might end up having a little bit more open space than your typical municipality based upon the visions, values, and mission of the community. Am I doing okay in the voice? A little louder. And to that extent, I believe that they manage that property significantly different than they do other federal properties, to the extent that they recognize its various prior uses, and they continue those, and they recognize them as businesses. And to the effect, I think it's supposed to economically and ecologically, as an open space, kind of have to satisfy both of those buckets. And I just kind of wanted to bring that up, just not necessarily that it's a right or wrong thing, but maybe to create a germ of an idea and maybe think more deeply about what we're doing maybe on our open spaces. And to that effect, I'm on the Ag Committee, and you know, the Agri-Nature Center is great, but you know, honestly, agriculture is business. I mean, it's huge business, but it's beautiful business. And to that effect, I think on some of these agricultural things, you need to be cognizant of that, you know, these are businesses and they need resources to be able to run themselves. And honestly, the Agricultural Nature Center, the Agri-Nature Center there does not have the resources it needs to be effectively run. The head of the Ag Department has left. We don't have him anymore. He was supposed to be a village administrator for an interim period of time. We have very few people over there. When he's trying to create educational programs, when he's over there trying to, I mean, he's weed eating stuff. At the same time, he's supposed to be a senior administrative leader within this institution. And I think that, you know, we have to have resources to take care of these things, and we need to give ourselves the tools to take care of them. And having a bunch of Johnson grass out there is not open space, man. That, you know, let a professional farmer professionally farm it. Give him the resources to do it. Let him sell his stuff out of there. Those things are important. And if you have to have animals out there, you have to have animals out there. You know, we can't have people coming in here saying, I got flies. Well, you know, flies have been around forever, and that's what comes with agricultural property. And that's what we value. So I think that, you know, I just want to kind of, you know, say that we need to give these spaces and ourselves the tools to be effective in their management and not be so tightly wound up that we get in the way of it needing to be what it is. Because we need cash flow to be able to run that thing, because at some point it's not taking care of itself, and we don't have the manpower to take care of it.
Okay. Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, thank you. I appreciate your comments. Madam Chair, if I may, at this time, staff proposes to move on to the report portion of the working session. This section is intended to be brief. I'm just going to touch upon a few things, just so that you know what is in our pipeline, because at some point, you know, things are going to start moving, and, you know, what are we going to do next? And to Commissioner Baldwin's point, we need a schedule so that we can see a little bit down the road of, you know, what we need to work on, and, you know, when we're going to work on it. And so I, you know, to start, you know, obviously at the top of the list is the Village Center zone. You know, we all know that we need to do some work on it. There's a list of things that have been mentioned to date that are in the report, simply so that you're aware of what has been coming to me. For the purposes of this report, the one thing I want to mention is that obviously this is tied to palindrome. So this is how it is tied to palindrome and how it's not tied to palindrome. You know, palindrome will bring in new materials. We're going to have a public review as it has been ordered to do so. And there will be things about the property that are going to be reviewed, discussed, and are going to be settled that are particular to that VC zone project. Those things are not necessarily carrying into the next version of this zone for the future. So at the start of it, and when we're ready to pick this up, there is going to be this two-part. What we are going to work on is what the VC zone of the future looks like. Because obviously there have been very, very many comments about what has been built that has not met expectation, and those things need to be changed. So those are the things we're going to be working on. Palindrome will be settled on a different path, but we're going to be working on the VC zone of the future. Okay. Now, yes.
Okay.
Yeah, please do.
So just to be quick, the palindrome segments, stages 4, 5, and 6, are they on the old rules, or would they be subject to whatever new VC zone we come up with?
Okay, Madam Chair, Commissioner Baldwin, right now, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. Okay, thank you. Now, the second item, lot setback distances, this has been a concern raised by the commission, specifically Commissioner Martinez. This is something we do need to work on, and as a more recent item with the passage of Ordinance 299 and something of a regulated process of creating open space and smaller lots and things being placed close together, is this something that we are going to need to look at? And so it raises a question, not with a specific program, but now that Conservation Ordinance 299 has been adopted, this may be an issue. Certainly for lots that are a half an acre or smaller that are not in a conservation, it's good to at least take a look at it to make sure that our regulations function as they are supposed to function without creating an undue burden. Because sometimes those burdens translate into variances. If the regulation needs to be adjusted, that would be the point of the discussion, without saying it will be or this or that. It is an issue. And that is something that is in the pipeline and something that we do need to get to. Okay. Now, as I mentioned earlier, on September the 10th, we have a public hearing, and our public hearing is to review a bed and breakfast application. So for that reason, I'm going to be very, very brief about this because I don't want to launch into a conversation about something that is going to come before this commission. The way the village reviews bed and breakfast to the T is excellent. And as you're going to see in this application, we have a list of to-dos. It's very, very extensive. The applicant has a lot to answer to, and that's going to be presented. That's nicely done. In this realm, there's bed and breakfast and short-term rental language mixed together. My comment is that at some point we need to sort that out. But as a point, the bed and breakfast part of it is not the problem. Per my comment in this report, there are other things that we're going to have to pull out of that language and take a look at. But as you can see from the list of things, it's not on the front burner right now, but it is something that we are going to have to get to when we have the opportunity. So, and lastly, as a attempt to structure a schedule, we did the best we could, keeping in mind that the village center zone is thrown into the middle of it. So it is likely that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about that, but we still have to work in other things, because as important as it is, there are other matters before the village, and we're simply going to fit those in as we can, so that as we're working on one thing, hopefully we'll be able to work on other things as we go forward. It will be slow and at times tedious, but there will be a number of things that we will work on. We may deal with language about variances and how we describe variances and how the language comes into play when we review an application. Are we precise about what a variance is? And does that translate into the applications we get? So as we move along with these things, we're going to be creating space for one thing, and we're going to be doing the best we can to fit in other things as we're able. But the one note about this schedule, and this is subject to change, this is putting it on paper and saying, this is what a schedule could look like, and we're going to be working on this as we go. But for certain, during the months of November and December, we propose only one meeting because they are holidays, and we do not presume upon the commission any more than that. So those are my report comments. You're more than welcome to ask me about any portion that I've mentioned.
Commissioner Edwards?
So I'm trying to read between your lines. I'm trying to understand the relationship between the paragraph that you have on the top of, what page number is that? It's a second page, says the timing of the lot setback distances and bed and breakfast, and it kind of rambles on there. And within the same sentence, VC zone, bed and breakfast, and short-term rentals is all kind of smashed together. Can you kind of, I mean, are those all separate items, or it's just, is it the same topic because it's all in the same sentence?
Madam Chair, Commissioner Edward, your point is well taken, and something of an illustration of what our circumstances are. They are separate issues. The binding thread are these sessions, and attempting to say, these are the things we need to work on, and this is a take on a structure. But pretty soon, we're going to be navigating some very difficult things. So we need a structured schedule.
Okay.
And working together, we will do the best we can to stick to it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay.
You know I have a question. Thank you, Madam Chair. So as we are going through and talking about the VC zone, I just want to put a flag out there that we have got a 4th Street, right? Beautiful, pre-1937-66. This is something that doesn't neatly fall to zoning, but zoning is the thing that gives it its form and structure. So to that point, as we go and talk about VC zone, we can't lose sight of C1 and Gateway because they also touch 4th Street. And we want to be mindful about what we are getting out of VC zone and how it should be similar, where there's a thread up and down 4th, and where we are being conscious about distinctions. So I don't think we can necessarily, that's kind of a big bite to try to jam all of that together. But I just think we want to be mindful that there's the rest of 4th that needs to be in alignment with this in some fashion.
The VC zone.
I totally agree, and of course, complicating that further because of the historic underlying zoning from way back when. We still have A1 that's butting up against 4th as well, and even some of those C1s and A1s are residentials. And so we do have a complicated hot mess, as some people would say, that we need to deal with and be very cognizant and respectful. That's the perfect word, respectful of those owners and uses.
Yeah. And Madam Chair, Commissioner, and Commissioner Baldwin, thank you for your comments. It is precisely correct. I'm hoping there will be some threads in the work that we do on the VC zone that will translate into other things, simply because there is going to be a need for consistency between them. If there are elements that are identified that are necessary for the public interest, then we don't want to lose sight of those with these other zone districts that we have. Yeah.
Are we, Commissioner Martinez?
first and foremost, thank you, because I think one of the things that we started with last year is starting a brand-new Planning and Zoning Commission. And one of the things that we talked about is that we were blessed to have the right people to start doing the right things. And I think that what you're showing us is something that was intended and necessary to happen. And the key to it is a proper time frame, because there's definitely something that we are seeing in variances, et cetera, that can be worked out if feasibly done in the right proper direction, but it is a process of change. But I just want to comment that we started out all brand new, and we started out with the ideas, and we're going forward with it. And I just wanted to make that comment that we are making steps forward to change things that were necessary to change, and look at things that have the opportunity to change for the right reasons. And I think short term is going to be one of those things. But most important, what we have to do is, even with these open spaces that we have to really look at, we have to look at almost the mission statement of this village and try to balance that, because that's so critical for people to say, well, what are you guys about? What are you guys about? And if we do it right, it's going to be a blessing that, let us show you. Look at how we've evolved. Look at how we're changing. And it's about the people. It's about the people getting what they need to do, but us understanding what we have to do and trying to get that balance. I want to compliment and give credit to everybody, because it's a process and it's a continuation. But we're making steps.
Excellent. Well, let's move on to the commissioners' informal discussion. Commissioner Barrow?
Madam Chair, I do recognize that this is an informal meeting and we're not taking a vote, but I want to express a wish that our September 10th meeting start at 5. There's something that I want to watch on TV at 7.
Can you tell us it's not like reruns of Housewives of New Jersey or
It
something?
is.
So,
You got it.
yeah, Madam Chair, Commissioner Barrow.
It's the debate.
Oh,
Presidential debate?
we will put this under other duties as assigned. So, yeah,
Okay, thank you. I just am expressing a wish.
okay,
Well, we can't vote on anything. This is only a workshop.
yeah. I will ask. Oh, and Brennan has corrected me. For September 10th, our scheduling is such that we have already advertised. So, but a 5 o'clock timeframe for public hearings is something we can continue to talk about.
And that's hard for a lot of working people to be here on a normal basis, so
Yeah.
it would be a one-off. I think,
Yeah, just a
as much as I want to support what you're saying, I think you're gonna DVR it, so.
I normally prefer 6 o'clock, or actually even 7 o'clock. But I just wanted to express a wish for September 10th and that meeting alone.
Thank you.
Are there any other comments from the commissioners? Commissioner Edwards?
My hat is off to the 6 people in the audience that are not employees of the Village of Los Ranchos. And for all the falderall for the last several years, I hope that you tell more people to come because they need to be here. And to that extent, I wish that the village would actually have a sign out here and they would have flashing lights. Today's a meeting, today's a meeting, today's a meeting. At the end of the day, I mean, it's just like so simple, cheap, and easy. So that's one thing. I also want to compliment the code enforcement guy because I think things do look better. One of the things that I also think that I'd like to say is if people want to come in here and ask us to do something for them, and their property has been brought up and complained about, and they're not taking care of it, I don't think that they get a hearing until they have a period of time for which they have taken care of their property in such a way that it is not getting calls and complaints on. I'll just say it out loud, man. At the corner of Chavez and Guadalupe Trail, there's weeds that are 6 feet tall.
Oh,
That place is not maintained. People are coming in here telling me, well, we're gonna have wonderful this and wonderful that. I don't see it because it's not even a shadow of what it used to be. I mean, that used to be really pretty, and it's not. And it raises a question of the character of the people involved when they're not taking care of it now.
Thank you. Any others? Seeing and hearing none, is there a motion to adjourn?
I move we adjourn.
Is there a second? It's been moved and seconded. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you, commissioners.
And we are over at 6:03.